You've heard it, let's make an impact. And this is actually our mission for the next 2 days, to really address the most pressing questions of our time. And therefore, our first innovation area is dedicated to the whole topic around resource efficiency. So that means we're gonna talk about modern techniques or technologies on how to build houses. We're gonna talk about climate, about circular economy, or even about new success factors and tools for manufacturers. And in that context, there is one person that cannot be missed. Please join me in welcome Professor Dr. Hans-Joachim Schellnhuber, Germany's most leading climate researcher and scientist. Professor Schellnhuber has basically dedicated his whole life around the topic of sustainability, and he has already founded the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in 1992. He has advised companies and governments around the world, and has now a very new, exciting topic to come up and a project to announce. So, Professor Schellnhuber, I'm very curious to learn more about it, and I'm also happy to welcome you on stage and talk about the question, how can climate crisis make inventions?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I think I got it right. And good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here again, not just digital, but in a hybrid format as well. I really enjoyed the minister's address. It's true, Hessen is a front runner in transformation for sustainability, so this Impact Festival is in the right place. Yes, I'm going to talk about the climate, but I'm also going to talk about a silver bullet about the transformation. Of course, you know, if you want to be sort of realistic when you always talk about there is no silver bullet, and we have a portfolio of solutions and so on, and in the end, the adding up of various components will make the day. But that's not always true, really. Sometimes, as in the corona crisis, a vaccine is the silver bullet, of course. And of course, we need to do social distancing and everything we have become used to, but sometimes it's one critical component that makes the day and that really changes the situation. So I'm going to propose such a silver bullet later in the day, and I think it will be a critical element in the transformation. It will provide a tremendously fruitful field for small and medium enterprises, for startups, for impact entrepreneurs. So watch out for this. Many of you know about it already, but maybe not everybody knows how important it really is. But let me start really with the overall situation our planet is in right now, and it's a very bleak state, actually. So the title of my talk is, I have a clock here, so if my talk gets too boring, we will cut off the microphone, so that's okay. So the title is The Climate Emergency Transformation. Yes, the minister talked about transformation. Everybody talks about transformation now, and of course innovation. But I will also talk about restoration in the sense of climate restoration. Is this possible at all? Yes, it is. And by the way, you know, there is a sort of a quite furious debate now whether, you know, what Annalena Baerbock said, if you do something, you prohibit something, this will create innovation. Is that true? Yes, it is true, but many people think, and this is really part of the political debate now in the run-up to the national election on the 26th of September, so most people say transformation through innovation. Yes, of course. But it's also innovation through transformation, and transformation may simply set the boundary conditions. So if you phase out the combustion engine, then of course you need to innovate something else. Same is true if you want to phase out concrete, then you have to work with wood, for example, with timber and so on. So it goes both ways. Again, it's transformation for innovation, and most of you subscribe to that, of course, but it is clearly also innovation through transformation, and there are many examples in history to demonstrate that. So let me go into the midst of my field. So this is a reminder of what happened in 2017, already forgotten. That was Tropical Storm Harvey, that is Houston, Texas, and the storm dumped actually 40 inches, and an inch is 2.54 centimeters, 40 inches within 2 days of water on downtown Houston. And so that's roughly a meter. And this has never happened before, but it happened again just 2 weeks ago, a few weeks ago in New York City, where within an hour, 89 millimeters, but these 89 liters per square meter were dumped Central Park in London. And this is so far beyond what the insurers have in their statistics, and which were used for calculating the premiums. So this whole insurance industry is now scratching their head and asking, can we still insure floods, for example? Can we still insure storms, things like that? So the whole thing is really in an upheaval right now. So this was in 2017, but another annus horribilis is clearly the year now, which will probably be the costly for the insurance industry ever since they started their businesses. So you had Australia, you had Tennessee, you had, of course, Germany, Rheinland-Pfalz, North Rhine-Westphalia. You had all the wildfires, the forest fires in the Mediterranean, and so on and so on. So the New York City event is not even included here. So what can we do about it? Yes, in Paris, I was there as member of the German delegation. In 2015, there was this sort of international law decision to limit global warming well below 2 degrees and try to do everything to keep global warming even below 1.5 degrees. And this can be justified by science, of course, but I should tell you right away that the 1.5 degrees guardrail is already out of reach, more or less. We will clearly overshoot that. But this is not a reason for despair, because what I will tell you about in the second part of my talk, we can actually come back to 1.5 degrees, even below that. It will take a century or so, but this is climate restoration, because we know now we have 1.2 degrees warming already, and this is the record here, and we clearly will go beyond 1.5 in the next 20 or 30 years. So the first important thing is to stay below 2 degrees, really. This is something like a firewall against the most severe impacts of global warming, and then crawl back actually over a century to maybe 1 degree warming. That is what I think is the manageable limit, really. We have now 1.2. We have already a shift in extreme events. With 1 degree, that means 350 ppm in the atmosphere. That's about a manageable thing. It's the upper limit of the so-called Holocene, which we enjoy for the last 11,000 years, and that brought about climate civilization. So it's not only stopping global warming, it's coming back to a sustainable climate, really. And this is something politicians haven't grasped at all. I thought I could lecture the minister about that, but obviously he left the room immediately. When a climate scientist starts to speak, the politician always run away. There's one exception, actually. There are 2 exceptions. Ursula von der Leyen, I will refer to her and Angela Merkel, but Angela Merkel is going out. Maybe Ursula von der Leyen will play a very important role in the future. So skip this. You are aware of the climate crisis. This is the real justification. So some of you may have seen this. This is a cartoon I created for a lecture I gave at Oxford University in 2001, actually. And this was meant as a cartoon. This is what could really go wrong on this planet if we keep on heating the atmosphere. So these are the so-called tipping elements in the Earth system. Global warming is not an incremental sort of linear change. It will create tremendous disruptions on this planet, actually. And here are the most important, the vital organs, if you like, of the planetary body, that is clearly the big ice sheets. If they melt down, altogether we would have a sea level rise of 80 meter. We have the big ecosystems, the Amazon rainforest, the tropical reefs and so on. But maybe even more important for us now are the so-called circulation patterns, both in the atmosphere and in the oceans. In the oceans, you have heard about the Gulf Stream, which has weakened already by 15% due to human interference, and it may actually be shut down completely by the end of the century. I personally think there's a 50-50 chance. If that happens, the weather in Europe will be changed dramatically. And then there is something that has been overlooked very often, the so-called jet stream, that is a high-speed band of wind, 10 to 12 kilometers above ground, that is separating cool Arctic air from our temperate air. And it's driven by this temperature difference, together with the Earth rotation that is creating a very important pattern. This is basic physics in the end, but very complicated physics. And what happens now? And that is actually behind the big extreme events we are all seeing over the last years. The Arctic is warming 3 times as fast as the rest of the planet. That has to do with ice albedo feedback and so on. Complicated physics again. But it's a fact. So that means the temperature difference between the Arctic air and our air in the moderate zones is becoming much smaller. That means the jet stream becomes weaker, and it's creating peaks of bulges, many bulges, so-called Rossby waves. And they often are fixed at the continental rims, so they stay for 6 or 8 weeks. And I show you how this looks like. So this is a real data assimilation. So you see the jet stream from the North Pole, but now we turn the planet, and you see the darker the red color is, the higher is the speed of the velocity. And it will actually, the picture will freeze with a huge Rossby wave over North America, what you see here. And this is transporting lots of dry and hot air from Mexico up to Canada, actually. Now, before we interfered with the climate, such a Rossby wave just traveled away within 2 or 3 days across the Atlantic, finally reached Europe and so on. But what we now see, the trend is that these Rossby waves stay for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Now, this means we have extreme events. Just look at the right panel here, that is a sort of wave pattern, a wave trail, Rossby waves across the northern hemisphere. That was in 2018, when over Central Europe you had a northbound Rossby wave. That means hot air from the Sahara reached actually the Arctic Circle. You had wildfires in Sweden everywhere. And while you had a southbound Rossby wave over northeastern America with tremendous floods and so on. No? And that is precisely the age of extreme events we are now facing. And this will deepen in the future. And this is really what we need to understand. Actually, the meteorologists didn't believe that when we first published the critical paper to that. It was first rejected, we resubmitted and so on. Finally, we got it published. Now it has given birth to an entire field of science. But the meteorologists never took notice of it until very recently. And now sometimes if there is the Wetterkarte or whatever in ZDF or ARD, you may find the odd meteorologist who refers to the jet stream. But it took more or less 20 years to convince them. This is a problem because we do not have 20 years for the next innovation. So this is where the tipping will happen, and it simply says below 2 degrees we will have some major accidents in the climate system. Actually, even the Greenland ice sheet may become destabilized with 2 degrees warming. We don't know yet, but it's very close. But beyond 2 degrees, we will just raise hell on this planet. Even the Eastern Arctic ice sheet will melt down, and we really will have a 70 to 80 meter sea level rise, and we'll lose the Amazon rainforest and so on. So this is the firewall, really, between climate chaos and difficult times where we have to sort of create resilient infrastructures and so on. But the difference, I was asked in a conference in Australia, so Professor, what is the difference between 2 and 4 degrees? And I was not expecting the question. So after a little bit of thinking, I said, well, the difference is human civilization. And unfortunately, everything we learn now in climate science is corroborating this statement, unfortunately. So what can we do? We need to do a dual approach. The dual approach means decarbonization, that means bring emissions down to zero, and zero means zero by 2050 at the latest. That means in Germany, in Hessen, whatever, it would be 2040, or even a bit earlier, as difficult it sounds. Nigeria will not achieve that by 2040, of course not, and other countries in Latin America or Asia. So we, who have the biggest carbon debt in the atmosphere, we have to be the front runners, of course. That goes without saying, more or less. But the problem is that this will not suffice, so let me see. We also will need, from 2040 on or something like negative emissions. What does that mean? We will not feed the atmosphere anymore with greenhouse gases. That goes without saying. But we will also need to extract from the atmosphere huge amounts of carbon in order to have this climate restoration. And so far, the biosphere is doing this job for us, but what are we doing? We are killing our best friends. We are destroying primary rainforest for soybeans, which we feed to pigs, and so on. It's just sheer madness, actually. So the biosphere needs to be protected, but we have to create artificial carbon sinks as well. And this will become the hugest business on this planet, but now, read my words, it's very important. I do not believe in these geoengineering fantasies. So there are people, Columbia University, Klaus Lackner, many other people who say, we will construct 10,000 fans which will draw down carbon from the atmosphere. This is much too expensive on the one hand. You would have to create a global infrastructure. It will never come along. But of course, it's completely inefficient. We can do much, much better, actually, by natural solution. And that is the proposal I'm trying to make here. Where do the negative emissions come from? This is from the IPCC, who gets it completely wrong, in my view, although I'm a member of the IPCC. But they talk about the so-called BECCS, that is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. You know, you plant lots of trees, maize, for example, you extract the energy, you sequester the carbon, and you finally dump it below the North Sea or the East, the Baltic Sea, this is complete nonsense in my view. It will never work. And in particular, it's much too expensive. But we can do it much, much better. So let me see whether it works. Yeah. So we need to talk about the elephant in the climate room, the built environment. So Christine Lemaitre is sitting here and looking at me. We had many discussions about it. You see, it's amazing that many people, except, for example, Christina, have overlooked this because about 40% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from the built environment. This is constructing buildings and infrastructures, of course, it's operating them, that is the biggest chunk, and it's also demolishing buildings. 40%. We have ferocious debates about flying, for example. Yes, the airlines produce 2% of the global emissions, but here we talk about 40%. So this is the field where we either win or lose the climate battle. And by the way, it's also, we talk about resource efficiency, it's also producing 55% of the waste by volume in a country like Germany. So this is the elephant in the room. So let me see. Yeah. And here I would like to draw your attention to, in my view, landmark paper nobody knows. It was published in Nature, so that is the top journal. It was done by 4 scientists from Israel, from the Weizmann Institute. And it has a very simple message, actually. So it looks at the living biomass we have on this planet. By the way, you belong to this living biomass, but it's a very tiny fraction. Most of it is trees, of course, and other plants. And he compares it to the anthropogenic mass we have, that is in particular concrete, gravel, plastics, metal, and so on. Tarmac, asphalt, very important. And what you see here is the green line, which is almost horizontal. That's the biomass we have on this planet since 1900. And you see it's a little bit going down. This is about 1 teraton. Now, you all have heard about gigatons and gigafactories and so on. That is a billion, so to speak. A teraton is 1,000 billions, 10 to the order of 12. So that's a lot, actually. And human interference has already destroyed 1 teraton of living biomass on this planet since the Industrial Revolution. So before the Industrial Revolution, it was 2 teratons. 1 entire teraton was destroyed already. But we have replaced it by anthropogenic mass. What you see here, it's rising very fast since 1900, actually exponentially. And this is the problem, because this comes with tremendous amount of fossil fuels used. But even if you produce cement, steel, and so on by chemical reactions, you create lots of CO2, of course. So we are building ourselves into climate chaos. By the way, concrete is ugly, it's dysfunctional, and so on. Nobody likes it, but we keep it. So the 3 most dangerous mass materials on this planet are plutonium, plastics, and concrete. What can we do? We have to replace this teraton of anthropogenic mass. As I said, asphalt, bricks, aggregates, concrete, metals, plastic, by 1 teraton of organic mass. Why and how? Well, we have to turn the built environment into a huge store of carbon. We have to build it in particular from timber. So that is the next revolution, so to speak. Let me see if it works. So I gave a talk recently at a huge conference And I used the title Reforesting the Planet, Retimbering the City, because these are the two elements. We, in principle, need to turn construction into wood processing, which you have here, and we can use, there's Moritz Hoffmann, I think, I'm seeing here, who has a very cool model of building information systems and things like that. He just showed it to me. Well, this may become, he may become the future Bill Gates, actually, because what people did in Silicon Valley, I was there actually at the beginning. Yeah, in the beginning, this was a garage company, and it turned into the biggest company in the world. Something like that may happen, but of course, for that, we need to turn the buildings in a global carbon sink. That is a paper we published last year. I think it's one of the most important papers I ever co-authored, buildings as a global carbon sink. And here we can show, this is just a thought experiment. If human population is still growing, so by 2050 we expect another 2 billion people on this planet, almost all of them living in Africa, actually. Now, we did a scenario analysis. If all the buildings for this additional 2 billion people would be done in concrete, mainly 90%, when you see on the right-hand side this huge bar, that would add another about 70 billion tons of CO2 to the atmosphere. But if you build them from timber, 90%, so you can still build the staircases from concrete, why not? Or you use even smarter materials, carbon fiber, what have you. But if you do that, you do not only avoid most of the CO2, you see the column more or less disappears on the right, but you actually store for good, for centuries, another 75 billion tons. So the difference is 150 billion tons of CO2. If you just would house the additional 2 billion in organic architectural buildings. And this is, by the way, I said I don't expect us to still hold the 1.5 degrees line, but if we do, humanity has still a carbon budget of about 300 billion tons of CO2. This 150 would be already 50% of that. So it makes or break the Paris Agreement, at least in its more ambitious version. So you see, it all depends whether we can quickly transform the built environment, the building sector, the Bauwende, so to speak. Took us 40 years, which is crazy, for instigate the Energiewende. Now people talk about Mobilitätswende. The Bauwende, we cannot wait for 40 years. It has to happen very quickly. And so I skipped that because in the end, we have, of course, to create a sustainable forestry, which is providing all the timber. This would be another lecture, of course. And I could have told the minister if he would have taken the time to listen. But I can tell him maybe on a different occasion, because Hessen has a lot of timber, actually. We have actually on the northern hemisphere enough timber for every new house to be built from that material. It's completely different on the southern hemisphere. Here we still keep on destroying primary forest instead of reforesting. This is the biggest madness of humanity in these times, actually. It needs to be stopped immediately. The Chinese have, for example, done a major reforestation program on the Löss Plateau. The difference here is only 12 years. And there are bold plans to reforest the Sinai. Now, before you start to laugh about it, look at sharply at the left-hand side picture. You see ancient river systems there. So this was forested 6,000 years ago. And because of the hydrological conditions in the region, you can redo it. But if it happens, depends not on nature, but on political will, of course. So Egypt is not a country which is run well, not really good governance, so I do not expect many things to happen there. So finally, in order to instigate the Bauwende in Germany, in Europe, hopefully globally, with our modest means, we have created a not-for-profit GmbH company called Bauhaus der Erde. I wrote an essay which is outlining the program for the FAZ in April this year. So if you care, you could read it there. And this has two keywords. Bauhaus, that reminds us of the old Bauhaus, which was founded 1919 by Walter Gropius and others. You see them on the right-hand side here, which was meant to be a Gesamtkunstwerk, a sort of integral piece of art where you bring together fashion and craftsmen and architects and designers and entrepreneurs. And this created the new architecture in the 20th century. It went wrong in the end with Le Corbusier and the Charter of Athens. It went wrong, it became dysfunctional. But today we need to restart it. And we need to build a Bauhaus for the planet, für die Erde, which creates the built environment within the planetary boundaries. That's the vision. And we have already a fantastic group of supporters from all parties. You see Annalena Baerbock, but you see also Manja Schüle from the SPD. We have Monika Grütters from the CDU and so on. We have creative people like Volker Schlöndorff. We have architects and so on. It's a very nice mixture of supporters. And this is one of the supporters, namely Ursula von der Leyen. Yesterday she made this State of the European Union speech. In general, nobody really listens because everybody expects that if something comes from Brussels, it must be utterly boring. But last year she announced the new European Bauhaus already. So I met her last week and she actually mentioned it again this year, and she said, this announcement of the European Union to create a new green Bauhaus movement has led to an explosion of innovation and creativity, and it's really true. So we had a festival online, of course, in April about it with 8,000 people who watched from the beginning to the very end. 8,000. That never happened to the European Commission, by the way, because in general, if they announce something, people say, oh, go away, let's do something better. But this has made a difference, really. So this will go on, and they have a dedicated program now. The fashion industry will be involved. We have a high-level roundtable for that, including world-leading architects. This is my favorite, Shigeru Ban from Japan, who after the Kobe earthquake built refugee buildings from wallpaper, more or less, from paper, from cardboard and so on. Amazing. This is, by the way, a church built from cardboard. He's member of our circle here. And the Pritzker Prize this year went to Lacanton and Vassal, who talk about refurbishing, using everything you have in the built environment and rebuild it. So recycling is, of course, the name of the game. And by the way, you can even recycle to some extent concrete, not very well. You can recycle metals, of course. Urban mining is important. But the most important thing is build from organic materials and run the buildings with renewable energy, 100%. If you do that, you go carbon negative, really. You can restore the climate. It's very, very important. So finally, just a few words about innovation. This is the plan for the so-called WOHO, Wohnhochhaus, wooden skyscraper in Berlin, which is actually mixing the various social classes as well. It's not just for the wealthy elite. And cross-laminated timber, for example, Brettschperrholz, is a simple way of engineered timber which allows you to build so-called ply scrapers. You can build, in principle, 100 stories high, something which is planned in Tokyo, for example. You can turn wood into a material stronger than steel, for example. And when it comes to architectural design, termite mounds are actually the best ventilated structures on this planet. This is a paper in PNAS from 2015, really worth to read it. So it's air conditioning by construction, really, both CO2 and oxygen. A fantastic achievement. So nature has all the solutions, but we are burning the book of life before we even read it. That is the biggest tragedy of all. Finally, last remarks. I was one of these crazy guys who in the 1970s already did some experiments with so-called neural networks. And you know this, but we didn't have the hardware at that time to make them work. Now this is the basis of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now the next big thing is clearly quantum computing. Again, Richard Feynman wrote the paper which is leading to all that many, many years ago. This is coming about. Now, if you combine machine learning, where, by the way, you can make errors, and quantum computing, where you make errors, but it doesn't matter because you can crowd out the errors by the sheer power of your calculation, then we have an extremely powerful tool. And this is actually what you can use in timber production and in timber construction, because if you work with a living material, which is dynamic, because of the environmental conditions, you have to do a much more intelligent production process than you do if you just go to the construction site and use dull concrete, which is not changing much actually. So the combination of no-tech, that is organic material, plus high-tech, that is quantum-based artificial intelligence, that will create a whole new era of innovation. I'm absolutely sure about it. So, the dawn of the cyber-organic age, I call it cyber-organic building, cyberspace material, cyberspace technology, plus organic solutions. And this is high-tech meets no-tech, and this is the way to save the world. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Always a pleasure listening to you. That was your big applause. Well deserved. I think you gave us a lot of food for thought and many impulses that we also will take with us over the course of the next 2 days. So you made it very clear that we do not need to be only CO2 neutral by 2050, but we need to have negative emissions 2040. So we need to extract CO2 out of the atmosphere. So that's one thing we are going to discuss tomorrow with a panel. And we're going to talk about the role of technology, the role of nature. What I take with me, John, is your skepticism towards technology solutions. You said this is going to be too expensive, and we're going to discuss this tomorrow. Curious to hear about this. Geoengineering will be one of the topics tomorrow, and I see John saying no. It's good to have some controversial discussions on these topics. The second big topic was, of course, all around the built environment. It was all about the importance of the construction industry. Laura, we both had big eyes when we saw the wooden skyscraper in Berlin. We want to move in there. Yeah. And I think this is kind of the perfect handover also for our next panel that's coming up now on this topic.
Yes, exactly, Leo. And it's actually our first expert panel on the questions why buildings are a key driver in sustainable transformation. And therefore, I'm handing over the microphone to Tanja Kufner. Tanja, please join me on stage. You're the head of... Hello.
It's so exciting to be here.
Yes. 2 words about you. You are the head of ventures and startups at Lemaitre Group, and you are also an investor for the past 25 years in smart cities, mobility, and energy. So I think, or I'm actually pretty sure, that she is the best person to talk about this topic, and also welcome your guests on stage.
It's so exciting to be here and to see people. Anyway, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And there couldn't have been a better Einleitung to what we're going to be talking about from Herr Professor. I mean, that was brilliant. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
would
The
you
stage is
like
all
me
yours,
to...
yes.
We will leave.
Okay.
Enjoy.
See you later. So great to be here. So I'm very excited. We're going to be talking about how buildings are a key driver in sustainable transformation today. And I'm happy to welcome three wonderful panelists. First on stage is Dr. Christine Lemaitre. I will talk about who she is and what her accomplishments are in just a second, but maybe it's easier to have everyone come up and sit down. The second wonderful panelist is Dr. Sabine Rau-Oberhuber. And last but not least, the only gentleman on this panel, Martin Rodeck. Happy welcome. So we're going to try to crush this in 25 minutes, but I'd like to start very quickly with a short introduction. Christine, you are the CEO of the DNGB, das ist in Deutsch, ganz crazy, wir machen das auf Englisch, which is the German Sustainable Building Council. You're also a board member of the World Green Building Council and also a board member at the Cradle to Cradle Product Innovation Institute, just to name a few. Sabine, you are the co-founder of Turn2, which is a Dutch architecture firm who focuses on circular economy. And you're also the author of Material Matters, which Martin and I have been trying to finish in preparation for this panel. It's a fantastic read, and I highly recommend it. And finally, but last but not least, Martin Rodeck is the Executive Managing Director of Edge Technologies, which is a tech real estate company that aims to reinvent the modern workplace as a driver for health, sustainability, and innovation. You basically use a lot of high tech, if I'm right.
Let's see.
So what we're going to try to talk about, one of these first topics, I would love to ask each and every one of you maybe, how do you feel that sustainable buildings are a key driver for transformation? How are we doing on that? What do you guys think?
Well, certainly it's a key driver. I mean, we just heard it, the big responsibility we have in the built environment. And I think things are moving. I think the things are moving quicker. When we started, like more than 10 years ago, I always say when I was in Brussels presenting the DGNB system and I was talking about life cycle analysis, people were laughing at me like the German nerd, you know, LCA of a building, and now everyone talks about gray emissions. So I think the topics are there, but I think we really have to gain speed and we have to really make it a wide movement, and this is still missing. We have a lot of front runners now, but there's a big part of the market who just does business as usual still today.
Yeah, we'll dive deep into that, but just very briefly, how do you see it, Sabine?
Yes, I think absolutely the built environment is key. We have seen the figures, and if we realize that 60% of the buildings which we will have in 2060 still have to be built, there's a huge, huge task. And just to give you a figure, the amount of concrete the US used in the 20th century was used by China in 3 years. So that is just stunning. So we have to speed up, and what sort of gives me some comfort that we will make this change is that investors now are pushing for it. I've been talking to big investors who are behind family offices, pension funds, managing their funds, and they are all pushing for CO2 neutral and I hope CO2 negative building in the future.
Martin, when we prepped about this, one of the first things you talked about was circular construction and the importance of classification, and we're going to talk about Madasta in a second. But I'd love your viewpoint.
Yeah, problem is I think we all agree. Let's not repeat ourselves. I think the challenge is the built environment. It's not so much that we build new, and let's not look at China, and I totally get every number you say. You're right, unfortunately. But I hear a lot of voices that say, how can we in Germany, contribute this little percentage? Forget it. Let's start here. Let's do stuff. And I think we have to be much better in new build. That is easier because you can design it on your desk. You can think about wood. We are building a big wooden hybrid building in Berlin, for instance, and it was bloody. But I will not be clear on stage here because the industry is not mature for it. All the designers they don't know how to do it. The testing engineers that have the green stamp, they have never built this wooden thing in Berlin. So there is, in the system, there are roadblocks, although everybody in his mindset is fully agreeing with what you said and what we all share. But let's get into that in the next 20 minutes, if we can.
When I did a little bit of research, I looked up what does a sustainable building even mean today? And one of the definitions I found was an old definition that said it's solely regarded as an energy efficient and capable building of providing reuse and recycling. I'll have to ask you guys what that means with reuse and recycling. Is that of just the stuff that people that live there use, or in terms of the materiality of the building? But anyway, apparently today, a sustainable building simply includes comfortable and healthy environment, is safe and secure and cost effective. That can't be it. I mean, seriously, what do you guys, what's a sustainable building, or the whole green building initiative? There's so much more too. Do you guys want to explain it?
Well, I think sustainability is a very wide-used topic, and there are many definitions out there. And I always like to just translate it with it's future-oriented and it's a quality building. And I think this is the biggest challenge we're facing today, that we allowed that the building industry became one of the biggest investment products for the financial world. I think Germany just ranked number 7 globally as one of the most attractive investor markets. And this is the problem, that we have to discuss building, and which is our environment. I mean, we spend 70% of our time in buildings, and we always bring it down to this technical thing, to this thing that has to be efficient and cost efficient. So I think we have to move back, because the definitions you just read, I mean, this is the original purpose why we're building, to have a safe and healthy environment and not an investment good. And I think this is what we urgently need to change, because otherwise you always have the discussion with people who just want to put it in their Excel list, and they want to take no risks. I think this is your experience as well. No risks. Everyone wants to be safe, and they want to make a maximum amount of money. And that doesn't go together with the climate change, but as well with our health. I mean, look at the cities today. You drive through, and I mean, that doesn't grow like this. People are building it like this. And I think this kind of attitude we need to change right away.
Yeah.
I think Sabine said it, that this regulation that is now, and I hate regulation too, let's be clear. I would rather love to work freely with everybody, but I think that change that we have now, and there's a big headline, it's called ESG, that is derived from the finance industry and now lands in our industry, and that is the best regulation I've ever heard. Not in the detail, but there is so much pressure that all the investors now have to report to the ones who give the money, because we will not change that this is an investment product. I think it's naive, but I think you're right, but it will not happen. We have to change the way that is perceived. And if I can honestly report that it's not only about yield, rendite, but also about impact and purpose, then we are on the right track. And that's a tough way. We know that.
Sorry if I can add to that,
please.
Because I agree this ESG movement, but I always have to say this, is not news. I mean, 2015, the Paris Agreement, I think it's paragraph number 8, which addresses sustainable finance. Where basically the world agreed to do that, Paris COP21.
Did not land in the real estate industry.
No, and now everyone is very surprised.
This is the problem.
And they had years to prepare, and now everyone is super nervous and excited and starts to redefine things. They had years to prepare for that, and they just didn't do it.
Yes, in addition, what you see is that because it's investment good, it adheres to the sort of common drivers of our current financial system, which is based on growth. And for example, there are constructions in China which are just not used by anybody. They are just built for investment purposes. There has been an algorithm developed at MIT which is able to analyze the life in a city and the infrastructure around cities, and they have discovered big so-called ghost clusters where nobody lives. So I think that is something which shows the absurdity of our current financial system and of buildings as an investment good.
When we talked on the phone, you talked about that we need, on a building level, you've got documentation. So if we could just build material passports for the building level, that would help us a lot. Can we talk a little bit about your transition, like what you did at Turn 2, and how you came up with the concept of materiality in a passport, or what we know as Madasta?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that.
what we started was we realized, I think Christina said it very beautifully, we came from an architecture office focused on making sustainable building, meaning energy producing buildings and building which were healthy and good for the people, so they're sort of based on the cradle to cradle philosophy as well, if you wish. But then we realized materials will be the big next challenge because we don't have an unlimited supply unless we build with wood. So we started to develop circular construction principles, but circularity only is relevant if you are able to manage the assets you create, so that the reusable materials you have, when you know where they are, what their qualities are, etc. So we started to equip our buildings with material passports, but a building for a material passport for a building doesn't make sense. I mean, it will end up in a drawer somewhere, and 30 years from now, nobody will know. So we thought we need something which is a central register. And the inspiration we took from the cadaster. We said there's a cadaster for every plot of land we have. We have to do the same thing for material, to register our materials in the built environment, and therefore sort of create an asset management system for the materials which circulate in our environment.
Martin, you're a part of this, right? You're one of the Kennedys.
Yeah, our company Edge is from the Netherlands originally, and you know, the Dutch people are always faster. You know that? Not on the motorway, but so we have been a partner there, and Madasta went to Germany, so to say, early this year, and was founded and set up in Germany. And we are one of the founding members. They are called Kennedys. That's about the, you know, going for the moonshot. 12 seats open, by the way. Who is interested in helping the German real estate and construction industry? Please let us know, because we really need help. Maybe one comment on this. I saw your graph about the concrete. This country is totally used and organized to build with concrete. There is, even if people know that it would be better to do it in wood or do it in whatever other material, the whole industry, the whole supply chain, everything, the whole regulations is assuming that we build with concrete. And that's, you know, a building built with concrete is a ton or more per square meter. That is in the production process, just in the embodied carbon. Not talking about then, of course, the operations phase. And so there are so many levers where we really have to turn the screws into the right directions. Maybe one comment to Madasta or to this material passport. Financially, a building is zero, the value of zero after, say, 30 years. That has something to do with depreciation, tax mechanics and stuff. Yeah, it's obviously wrong, because this building is minus, I guess, financially. It's great. You know, this is see how we use it. A new build would be really difficult to build such a thing new, that we all feel comfortable and safe and enjoy this day to day. So maybe last comment, you said high tech. This is my biggest worry about us, because we are called Edge Technologies for very different reasons. We need technology to understand how buildings function, to collect data. But the perfect building has at least no visible technology, needs to be easy to handle for users and for operators. And of course, if there is in the back a bit of technology, why would the building industry be the only industry that has not been digitized? I mean, come on, we need to do this. And we're on a way, but also there's a lot to gain and a lot to move.
Well, we know about the construction industry emissions and so on and so forth, but one of the worst things is the emissions that we have from the energies of buildings post-built, right? So when I took the train down here yesterday and I'm looking at all these buildings out the window, I mean, I'm a technology investor, and we constantly spend money on new materials, carbon sequestering, concrete alternatives, and that stuff is super cool. But 90% of the infrastructure we need to deal with are these houses that are everywhere. So is it about retrofitting? How can we make these kinds of buildings sustainable? We need technology, like you said. But how can we go about this on a planetary scale? There's so many assets that are half dead, that are going to be around for what? Another, you said 30 years, but the life cycle of a building is somewhere 300. Between 50 and 100, right? So what needs to be done on that level?
Well, I think first I think there's no way around it. We will have to deal with every building we have. So I think a big part is data. We have to establish, and I think this is where the regulation still today shies away from. We need to have a monitoring system in place, and it has to be the law that every building is being monitored. So you know what you have, because the reality is we see a lot of big numbers, but they always don't really know the energy consumption of this building or the next building. So I think this is, when we talk about existing building, this is the key driver. Where do I stand? I have to do monitoring. I have to start optimizing, and then I have to start renovating, and not the major renovation things we see today, where everything is just renovated, and then the user comes in and they just don't care. And the most sustainable building on the technical side will not be sustainable or energy efficiency or even climate positive if the user behavior, if the way the user is maintaining the building doesn't add up. And I think to close that picture, I think monitoring is really the key for our existing building topic we have in Europe. And for us, it's the biggest challenge right now.
Maybe to add, Germany is focusing on energy, the whole of regulations. What do we have a wall in our house, and that is not, the insulation is not good enough? What do? We put really bad stuff to the outside. Dämmung, what is that? Insulation. And guess what? The German insulation industry, they're doing really good, because it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker. The climate in these buildings is not getting better, because it is a problem with the humidity and with all the things that we know. If you have a kind of, a capsule room, the air will never be good in that room. All other countries are now focusing, and for longer focusing, on CO2. We just started in Germany. Yeah? So the whole regulation, how you get your loan, your mortgage on your house is based on energy. We don't have an energy problem. We have loads of energy. We can't distribute it the right way in Germany. That's okay, point taken. But I think that needs to be more hand in hand.
But why? Is it lobbying? This is the reason.
Exactly.
It is just lobbying. I mean, look at the renovation wave out of Europe, powered by, and then you see all the manufacturers' organization representing insulation material producers and others. And I think I'm not a big believer that our politicians will actually fix the problem. I think it's our responsibility, especially in the building industry. But one thing I really expect is that they start to look behind the nice face, and that they look at the context, because this is what it is. I mean, we tried for the new NF to go to CO2 as the goal. And for us at DGNB, it was a very painful process, because the insulation lobby was telling us we're doing greenwashing, you can just build a tent, put PV on it, and then everything is good. And the politicians were not brave enough. And I think this is the reality, that actually facts, data, and knowledge, and people who actually have experience, they're not listened to, but lobbying it's much stronger. And I think this is what we need to change in Europe, but on the European level, but I think in Germany as well.
Can I vote for you in 2 weeks?
Sorry?
Can I vote for you in 2 weeks?
Please do.
Quick question. One of the things you said on the telephone as well to me was that we just haven't seen enough politicians that are gutsy. But before we go into that, Martin, one of the first things you said to me on the phone that we could do is to, even before we talk about the concrete lobby, is to abandon these Dämmschutz. How do you say it in English? The insulation? Sorry, my microphone's really weird. Apparently, you would get rid of that. But if we abolish all of these insulation materials, what's an alternative? What could we do?
Yeah, I think abolish is then also maybe naive, but I think it starts with what you can do to fulfill goals. But the goals are wrong. And this is what Christine tried to explain. The goals have to be reset. And that is obviously a mega roadblock in Germany. I'm working next to my job. I'm working in the Federal Association in the real estate industry, and I have the innovation chair. And we discussed now that we really need we build a group of people that is, and this CIA is pretty close at the politicians, maybe the closest of all organizations. At the moment, they're focusing, of course, in the Corona crisis, they're focusing on how the retail is doing and about the hotels, so also business-driven. But I think there's quite a voice that I hope we can help to change these goals. And I don't think you can avoid it completely, but you have to think about it differently. There is a 2226 house. It's called 2226 because the house itself regulates itself purely by thicker walls built. Yeah? No insulation. Think of the Altbauten. It's great. In summer they are cool. In winter they protect you from the cold. And that is one way of thinking, not with concrete, let's be clear, but think in that direction.
But I think maybe to this insulation topic, I think one of the biggest challenges we have, and I think this is where we as an industry are just super lazy. Because one thing is, to have a high quality building envelope. I mean, this is how it started, which was a good thing, that you don't start heating the outside. But then we don't know when to stop. So it's like, you need a high-quality building envelope. So if you say not more insulation, it doesn't mean we don't need insulation. Sure, we need that. But then there is just a limit to where just more insulation doesn't make sense. And we're at that point, and then we're not forceful enough to say, okay, one part, we really reached the end of it, so what are the next components we have to optimize? And we're building systems, and then the system needs to be fed. And this is why we don't have the strength to maybe as well evaluate. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes in the building industry, but we never talk about it. We always see the great renderings and the great stories, but we never talk about what happened to it. And I think this is, for me, is the key. We need a new kind of honesty and really reflect. I think it's not a problem if you make a mistake, but you have to acknowledge if it was a mistake, and it's okay. But this is what we always do. It's like, let's make the system more professional and more, and all of a sudden it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, but the problem is also that every building is sort of a prototype, so there is no innovation in a sort of standardized way. That is one thing. And I think also the way the business model operates of the construction industry, of construction companies, is really strange, because they have sort of this margin of failure of 10%, which everybody accepts, which in no other industry would be acceptable, which means that we are wasting incredible amounts of material on the construction sites, for example. And I just want to refer what you said in Berlin to the wood construction building you did. We did together with Edge another building in Holland,
Triodos.
where the Triodos Bank, which was made completely of wood. And it's been held together by 160,000 screws, so you even can take it apart and reuse it. And because of the standardized way we designed the building, we did have much less failure, no failure in fact, and the construction time was 5 months quicker than with a building the same size in the traditional way. So I think rethinking the building processes is a very, very important thing.
It's funny because you guys know I come from smart city and mobility and infrastructure, more on the transportation side. And when I joined Lemaitre, it's a whole new world for me, joining the architects and the builders. And I did my sort of question learning about the problems across the entire ACEO industry. And I said to my colleagues in the US, what is sustainability for you? And then they said, well, if we could just deliver a construction project on time and on budget, that's sustainability. And I'm like, seriously? That's all you have for me? I'm terribly sorry about my microphone. So I'm going to talk less. We have 50 seconds. If you guys each had a magic wand and you could make anything happen, each one of you give me a quick statement of what you would ask for.
That people just get started. I think we have the knowledge. There are many tools out there. I mean, it's and just get started and stop this. And I think we're very good as well in Germany, like the saying, there's a problem for every solution. And we're really masters in that. Everything is a problem and gets thought through. And just stop that and get started and be brave and maybe even risk making a mistake. It's not the end of the world, even if it maybe seems like that.
Thank you. How about you, Sabine?
I absolutely believe that that the biggest challenge is the mind change we need to achieve on a broad scale. but we also need to grasp the complexity of the challenges we are facing. So it's energy efficiency, it's energy sort of CO2, what you're saying, so buildings CO2 negative, but also with buildings make buildings which are not at the detriment, but enhance biodiversity, are resilient, climate adaptive, etc. So it's a big, big challenge we have there. And I hope that people start to focus on complex rather than simple solutions.
Thank you. Martin.
So I would make that the center point of but the political agenda. Because the other topics that we have, and we have a VUCA world, we have so many topics, complexity. But I think if you see those numbers, it needs to be in the center point. That goes for infrastructure, that goes for mobility, that goes for energy, and that goes for construction, real estate. These sectors, powered by digitalization, can and will be the main driver. But our Bauminister, and I'm not saying that I'm sure you don't know who our Bauminister is, right? Construction Minister. Because the guy is unfortunately also our internal minister. What is it, in minister?
Oh, wow.
And he never focused a single second in the last 5 years on what we discussed here. And that's a big failure. And so I hope, whatever the election will be in 2 weeks, that this is a focus point.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. You guys have been extremely inspiring, and it's been a pleasure meeting and talking with you. I only urge you to follow these people, and let's come back maybe in 6 months or a year and see where we are today. Thank you. It's nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, time for a photo. You get the stage for the photo. Thank you very much, Tanja and the panelists. Super interesting topic that hopefully gains a lot more momentum right now with the EU Green Deal, with the new European Bauhaus. Before we come to our next topic, quick logistical information. At your seat, you would be able to take off your mask if you want. So that's part of the hygiene concept, so you don't need to wear it at your seat. If you walk around, then please, again, wear it. But I think we have a high level of discipline in the room. So now we are accelerating the shift to a circular economy. And for this, it's my great pleasure to welcome Harald Friedl. Harald, you're an expert in the field. You've been working in circular economy and sustainability for more than 10 years now. And I'm very curious, how do we make that transition happen? So, warm welcome. Good to have you here on stage. We're going to hear from you in the keynote all around circular economy. The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, Offenbach and Frankfurt, I guess. I'm from Austria. You will hear it in my accent. And thanks for the organizers to, again, finally put the festival together, which is fantastic, to have the opportunity to be here, to actually connect in person. And I want to make this experience of these 50 minutes together a real experience together, as lately I'm getting more in a space where I try to make people feel what the circular economy is about, because I think that gets us then into how to accelerate it. We can talk about all the theory, but I would like to put a little bit into practice, and I need you, the audience, to help me with that. So would you all get up at the beginning of the presentation and just shake your hands, please? At the beginning, I know the German audiences are always fantastically active. It's the same in Austria and in Holland, where I live. And then please take a breath with me. So we're all connected. Thank you very much, and sit down. And we're going to do this 3 times during these 15 minutes. I'm going to speak quite fast. I hope that's okay for you, because I was only given a little bit of time. Connect, that's very important. Connect on all the platforms so we can actually make this festival worthwhile. The festival starts, the community building starts before the festival, and obviously ends long after. And for me, I only come here to together create this. Otherwise, I would be sitting with my kids, much more interesting, as all of you know. But the colleague just said before, we have 6 to 12 months to come together again to see where we are. But I truly think that's not satisfactory anymore. We really need to keep each other accountable every single month what the progress is. We are running out of time. I just want to say that, and I will keep very short about why the situation is difficult, and that we actually have a huge responsibility and opportunity to do something about it. The colleagues set me up for failure. I'm not a specialist on the circular economy. I'm a student of the circular economy. Despite the fact that I've been doing it for the last 5 to 10 years very intensively, but the topic is so vast and so big, and people who are specialists, like here in the built environment, have very different approaches and topics to deal with than we have in the electronics sector, for example, or in the food industry. So everybody is kind of an expert in his or her own field, but together, hopefully, we can make this the new normal. I think that's where we have to go. I'm Harald, or some call me Harry. I have been the CEO of an organization called Circular Economy, where with 100 people we have been doing this full-time. Take companies, businesses, cities, and countries from a linear system to a circular system. And that's a huge task, and we were working out of Amsterdam, and it was fantastic. And we were 100 people really creating a good of impact, I think. We worked a lot with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. If you need more information on the circular economy, just Google Ellen MacArthur Foundation or circular economy. You will find a ton of information also about the built environment. At the moment, I advise my own country. I'm an accelerator for the circular economy for the government of Austria. I advise the World Economic Forum, the climate change negotiations. And everywhere, the topic of circular economy is coming back. And that's great to see, because it was very different 5 years ago. We still had to make the case for a circular economy. Now businesses, from Philips to the big steel and the cement companies, pick it up as the Nestles of this world are talking about the topic. And we have to keep them accountable that actually they deliver. And I really love to do this, but truly don't call me, please, an expert. I'm a humble student. I can learn from all of you. And I mean that in the true sense of the word. And we live in these incredible times, and this makes me sometimes worry a bit in the morning, but even more motivated. On the one hand, the IPCC report, the UN climate change report, said again, we are running out of time. The Secretary General of the UN says it's red alert for the planet. Sometimes I feel life is just continuing, but if we stop for a moment, if the head of the United Nations says it's red alert, I think it's really time for us to step up and change the game fundamentally. And then the same opportunity, the same situation is an opportunity with Al Gore and others saying, if we invest in the circular economy, if we invest in the green economy, it's the biggest investment opportunity we are seeing right now. It will come with other parameters, with other investment frameworks, for example, or investment time frames, but it is a huge opportunity. The thing I want to talk about briefly this morning is 3 things. I think we truly need a knowledge revolution. We need to empower the knowledge revolution and awareness revolution. And to make it all happen, we need an action revolution. I'm kind of getting edgy when people in discussions last time at big insurance companies is stopping at the question is, how do we define the circular economy? And we all know that's important, but it's not so relevant because there are many different ways how to look at it, that various nuances are different. It's about how do we action it? Because the situation is difficult in a multifold of times, and I only give these 5 figures why I think the situation is difficult: 1, 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. For you to remember, you can stop any conversation why systems change is needed. It's still off the question that I'm asked, why do we actually need change? I think these 5 figures speak for themselves. 1, and we all know that, 1% of the world has more wealth than 99% of the rest. I think that's an unacceptable situation. If we do the nice test and try to explain this to a kid, it's not possible to explain it why it should be that way. 10 is the amount of years we still have to avoid climate chaos. 100 is the amount of species that are eradicated every single day from the planet. 100 species every day from the planet are eradicated. 1,000 times, and then we talk about the ministers before and how difficult the situation is of the old system, 1,000 times more money still goes into the fossil fuel-based industry rather than into the bioeconomy. And now, to my humble opinion, the bioeconomy should be one of the parts of the future. It is part of the circular economy and a very important part of the future of the economy, but still there's much more support for the old economy, and 10,000 is the amount of wildfires we had at every single moment when the big fires were there in Australia. So we are literally burning. Now, I read this fantastic article, and you have to look it up. I want to share it just yesterday, when some people say, so what is the scenarios we are going into? How does the world look like if we fail to act? And I just want to give you a couple of, it's a consulting company that has written that, and you can text message me or whatever, I'm happy to share it. I just don't want to mention the name. And they're talking about a future if we fail to act. That gives a couple of examples. First, we're going to run out of diesel and petrol, obviously, and there are going to be fines on people who are still using the car. It talks about a family that tries to leave Netherlands because the Netherlands have become an inhabitable country because the ocean level has risen so far that the government has to put a lot of money into protecting the country from flooding. That's why there's no more public spending in the places where it should be spent. It talks about an emergency tax on electricity, on wages that have fallen 50%, so a multifold of crisis, on a ban of exporting rubbish, so the Netherlands suddenly has mountains because the rubbish is being stored there. In the evening, it still has 30 degrees Celsius, it's warm, and the family wants to emigrate to New Zealand, from Holland, where I live at the moment, because it's a place where the circular economy is truly being tried out. We obviously also look into a situation, if we fail to act, where many businesses are going to go bankrupt. And this article talks about the family is leaving the country in Zeppelins and not anymore airplanes because all the airplane companies have gone bankrupt. And I think it's quite nice to read this because it makes it much more tangible than just saying a figure, we have 10 more years. We're going to look into a social and economic and environmental crisis that is multifold. And the article ends, the beginning ends with, they were looking back and thought, how could the situation have turned if we would have acted? Now, it always gives me goosebumps because I don't want to be in a position in 10 years that I will tell the next generation, the kids, each other, oh, we could have done this. Systems change is possible, and the IPCC report also says we can change if we go for fundamental, deep-rooted changes in every sector that we see. Agriculture, the cement industry, aluminium industry, shipping, aviation, you name it, with deep-rooted changes. And when I read what is happening on a day-to-day basis, we don't see these deep-rooted changes yet. It's nice what is happening. Pilots are nice, but we need to scale and be fast in scaling up solutions. I was asked to briefly put us on the same spot that we all know what the circular economy is. A way to achieve systems change, the one I find super useful and easy, and a very clear one that you can explain a kid, a minister, or a CEO, is we're going from a linear system, something is being produced, used, and at the end, 90% of all the materials are either burned or landfilled, to a system where we don't do a little bit less bad, we want to do fundamentally better. And it comes with very difficult choices. We have to be aware of this. It comes with very difficult political and economic choices. But I think naturally we all feel much more inclined to have a system where we don't throw away. In our own households, we don't want to produce too much rubbish. We still do with all the plastic, obviously. But we want to keep our household in order. And it's easier if we do things, strategies like retaining, refurbishing, reusing, recycling, taking care of each other and our resources. And then we can rethink cities. Cities become organisms. Companies become organisms. And as part of the organisms, not only the materials that we have to produce the products, it's also our employees and supply chains. The circular economy is it's a very wide definition. It's an economy where we want to avoid waste, that's one. And the other one is where we want to keep products at the highest value, the longest amount of time. And once with my company, our organization, we broke down what kind of pillars you need to follow to get there. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time, but just as an input for you, if you look on my Instagram, on LinkedIn, you will find this. It's really important to prioritize regenerative resources, to use things as long as possible and keep them at the highest value, to acknowledge that waste is not waste, but waste is always a material for another process, that we have to go into new ways of collaboration. Business as a service models are very interesting. There's a big report coming out from our friends from Systemic that are from Germany that are going to launch the Everything as a Service report, I think this week or next week, just before New York Climate Week, which is going to be interesting if we see our clothes as a service. We don't need to own our clothes, or mattresses as a service. Somebody told me even whiskey as a service. I don't know what it means exactly. But if we have products as a service and we keep the materials as an ownership of the company, there's a huge potential to save materials and on reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Digital technology and a different design. We have to design products fundamentally different. These are key pillars for a circular economy. Please read about them. And when you message me, I'm happy to send you back also on my social media accounts. You will find guiding questions you can tomorrow bring into your organizations and companies to effect change. Now, that's the knowledge piece. I have 3 more minutes to go into the awareness piece and end with an exercise where I all need your help. The awareness piece, I would like you to get up one more time, please. And I'm thinking about this a lot because I can talk to your heads and brains and I explain you the circular economy theoretically, but I believe if we act from our hearts, I truly believe that. It sounds sometimes maybe wishy-washy in this context, but if we believe in our hearts and come from a place of gratitude, I believe we will anyway do things fundamentally different than we have ever done before. So I would like you, please trust me, close your eyes. And then I'm often asked, so how does this future look like? Where do we want to go when you work with a company or a city? And I want to give you some examples and let them sink in, please. It's the positive side of the future. If we apply circular economy, if we apply a regenerative economy, we're going to go into a place where there's going to be prosperity for all, where buildings are used much more, less for commercial use, but people live there because they have chosen to have a better work-life balance and they have chosen to work from home. People are not using single-use plastic anymore. People are walking around with their cups to have their coffee. Because of driverless technology, we're going to be in cities where there's no more traffic jams. We don't need traffic lights anymore. You'll be able to go into shops where they ask you, do you want to return it or repair it? Because we want to keep things into the loops. Companies will be accountable to transparency systems, and we will need less materials to produce things. And we have green energy to power our economy. And now, how do we bring this back into where we are? Please keep your eyes closed still. Imagine you're standing on the top of a mountain. And then you look down around you, and you see all the things in life that you're grateful for. Your family, your friends, the projects you worked on, the projects you have worked on, the positive results, the people you have helped, your pets, the places you have visited, things that you have found somewhere that make you happy. And then maybe you can put your hand on your heart and feel grateful for what we have been given on this planet. And I believe from this place of feeling this gratitude, we're going to be able to design together different businesses and different cities and countries that are going to behave differently, because the way forward is going to come with a lot of challenges. And you can open your eyes again. And maybe at home, when you do business planning, or think about, you first go in a place of gratitude. It's something I try to use with the people I work with in seminars. It makes the whole conversation easier. Because nobody has ever told at the end of the year, at the end of his life, and there's this famous book about the 5 regrets of the dying. And I take it as inspiration. People don't regret not having spent enough time in the office. They don't regret not having made more money. But they regret having truly lived their purpose, even found their purpose, connected with the people they really love, and created some shared and added value for society. So if we want to end life whenever we pass on as a starting point on how we want to feel and act today, I think radical change is always possible, and then we can achieve the climate goals. Because in the end of the day, we all feel much more instinctively drawn to regenerative practices, to take care of the planet, to take care of each other, and to connect the dots in a new way of radical collaboration and transparency that we need. To make that happen, we need a new way of leadership. I was in a company a telecom company, and we did the first sessions about circular economy. And the CEO comes to me afterwards and says, Harry, if we do all of this, and we know it's the right thing to do, it feels like an open heart surgery. Now, I don't expect of anybody less than going in the future for open heart surgeries, because this is what we need, what deep change is. And I believe it's going to get us much more closer to what we want to be as human beings right now. We've been tricked in a way in a system that we think it's about optimizing our own benefit and optimizing financial resources. But I think if it's about optimizing our joint prosperity, that's the way to go. And we need to defy mathematics. Don't tell our children, because 1 + 1 can be 5. Shared prosperity is going to create more for everybody. And I would love to do, at the end, to get us into regenerative leadership and into action, do an exercise with you. And if the music works, dear friends in the back, I would like to do an exercise with you that the most powerful team in the world is doing. And I hope you can follow me at least for 30 seconds. Could you put it a bit down still? I want to explain it. I think we need a real new way of team spirit. We are all warriors of change, and we need to bring the change back wherever you are, in your business, in your city, or in your government. Are you a minister, are you a director, or an NGO leader? It doesn't matter so much. And I did this exercise last week in a retreat, and it was a lot of fun, and it feels very awkward at the beginning. It definitely feels awkward for me here. I'm not an All Black, I'm not from New Zealand, but I love what these guys are doing, because they say we can do it together. That's in the end of the day what this warrior stance is about. So, can we do 30 seconds this exercise? It's like this. Ha, ha, ha. And then you can do it maybe a bit with a smile, or, you know, but meaning it, because together we can make massive change happen. So let's do this. Maybe just for 30 seconds, turn up the volume a bit, and let's do this, okay? Ha, 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 ha. Ha, 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 ha. Guys, thank you. And please, music down. We are all connected. We can do it together, and we need to be a team. Do the dance every single morning and say what you can do more. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Harald. We go back to back. You can take a seat. Take a deep breath now. We're going back to back in our panel. One thing I learned, there's something about the Netherlands and New Zealand. 2 hot topics already at the Impact Festival here. So let's get support, and my pleasure to welcome Kilian Kaminski. You're the co-founder and CEO of Refurb. We're going to talk about your solution as well. Sebastian Fritz, Head of Business Development at Grover. Going to tell more about what you do in a second. Warm welcome. Big applause for you. Stage is all yours. I saw you also doing the exercise. Harald gave a great introduction into the topic. Harald, you said the objective should be to make it easy for kids to understand. Maybe we still need to talk a little bit about this. What is actually circular economy and what is not circular economy? Kilian, you want to start with this and add on to what Harald already said?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is that people have to understand how important it is and that everyone is able to change. So it's not about these questions all the time asked, what is the difference that I make as a person? But if everyone thinks that, then we do not have this movement that there is a huge change. And so I think in general, I mean, what Harald touched as well, circular economy is a really wide topic, and it covers a lot of different industries, a lot of different areas. In our case, for example, it's mainly about electronics, where we're working in. And in this case, it's about explaining that there is not only new and used, but there's also like something in the middle, what also Harald described regarding repairment, refurbishment, or at the end it would be something recycling, but not going into this direction of always we use something and we throw it away. Yeah. Because this cannot be our future, because if this would be our future, then we all will have a much bigger problem than we all expect.
I mean, yeah, maybe we start with the linear model, Harald, that you showed. And when you explain it, it sounds trivial. But still that understanding our linear model, we use something, we throw it away. Do you still feel that's a mindset shift that is happening now? Sebastian, how do you see this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Harald said, called everything as a service, and that's, I think, electronics, for us at least, that's the next logical step. You'd only pay for what you use, and don't buy something, accumulate it at home. You have all these 10 iPhones in your drawer and whatnot, and once you don't need them anymore, you send them back to us, we refurbish them, and send them out to the next user.
Maybe we should also...
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
It's interesting what you guys are doing with Refurbed. And it reminded me, I had a conversation with the Japanese environment minister about 2 years ago, and he said, the Japanese, he said, if we want to make the shift happen, we have to make this sexy. And the thing is, what I see sometimes talking to all kinds of generation, that what you're doing now with Refurbed is also interesting because people said, I want to be part of this. I need to be part of this. I can't not be part of it anymore. So I think with the young entrepreneurs now saying that's the way to go, I don't need what I think I read a year ago from an Apple designer. We always need the newest thing. It really makes me feel very anxious. If this is true, then we can pack up. Because the Chinese and the Africans are now going into a place of more prosperity. There's going to be a lot of growth coming from there. The built environment is going to grow very differently in Africa than in Europe. But I think if you can make it sexy and approachable and easy, that's why I think it's always the kids check. It needs to be easy, so not get lost in definitions, but go for the logical next step, which, for example, you are showing very clearly as a business model. That's really the way to go.
That's an interesting part. I mean, the consumer shouldn't really care about, is it circular economy, does it fit definitions, where am I in this model, but it needs to be easy and it should work, right? And there should be the right incentives. Your two solutions are similar, but also very different. We've seen it. Harald, you've shown a beautiful map. Reuse, refurb. I mean, these are the two topics you're working on. Kilian, refurb, the name says it. It's about refurbishing electronic products. How does it work on your platform? Maybe you tell us a little bit about this, and why is this circular economy for you?
Yeah, so I think what Harald touched as well, again, like it has to be the new normal, right? It's not about, we want to don't create a niche area, but it has to be the case that your people are standing somewhere at a table and are proud that they buy something refurbished. Because they don't buy new, because they take care about the society, they take care about the environment, and this should be the future. On our platform, we're providing all of our customers opportunity to buy electronic devices from smartphones to tablets, but also household good, kitchen good, even drones, which we're already having on our platform, as a sustainable option. Because I think in the direction where we are going is right now that there is no really big benefit to always buying the new devices. One big manufacturer yesterday announced, or 2 days ago, sorry, announced their new device. And when you look at the specifics, the technical development is quite limited. So the advantage of always having the newest is getting smaller and smaller. And for this reason, I think it's even more important to think about how we can consume on a more sustainable way. And reusing devices which are already produced is, in my opinion, the easiest way to do so.
What would be interesting here, that was not planned, but I would like to get a sense from the audience. And Harald, you said hand on your heart, so please be open and honest. Who of you has more than 5 unused electronic devices at home, under the bed, somewhere? Who has more than 5 unused devices? Hands up. You don't? Kilian, you don't?
No.
Okay. So that was kind of half of the room. Does it surprise you? I would have expected more people. How do you see this? No?
How was the half the people?
Half the people.
I thought more.
You thought more?
Yeah.
Me too.
But it's shocking that it's happening, no? It's
sure.
It's massive.
We just discussed before. There's now this whole right to repair initiative coming from the EU. It would be actually interesting to hear from them, does this help? Because when you want to repair an iPhone, etc., you kind of run into all kinds of troubles, right? You want to replace the phone immediately. You can't even repair the whole thing often when it's broken. A part of it is broken.
Yeah, so
I was actually interested in hearing that from you.
Sure, I mean, maybe to touch it shortly, I'm part of an expert group of the European Commission, and also we are part of the right to repair. And one of the big problems which is existing right now is that the design of the products are created in a way to make it as difficult as possible for normal people, but also even for refurbishers or repair companies to repair device. Which means, which comes even to the result that you cannot repair the camera of the newest iPhone because you need a software ping from Apple itself to activate this camera. So it's not even possible to repair it anymore. And I think in general, if we look in the direction where we're going, that's the opposite way, right? We should go in the direction where it's getting easier and easier to repair a device. And when I look back to my use, where I had a Nokia, you can just open the back cover and exchange the battery yourself. So there was not any involvement of any professional. And I think this is something where we cannot only rely on the manufacturers that they do it themselves, but we also have to enforce the political side of sending some enforcement to ensure that we force the manufacturers to change and to open up for spare parts replacements, open up for longer software updates, but also in general make the device easier repairable in the future.
And that's really interesting. Do they have an incentive to change in this direction? I mean, for you, it would be best if that device is as easy to repair as possible. Do they at some point in time also see you then as a competitor? Is there a conflict of interest? How do you observe this, now that you're growing bigger as well?
Yeah, so I mean, for the first question, if they have an incentive, not. Because, I mean, that is the reason why they launch every year, every half a year, new devices, because they make their profit in the hope that people are changing their devices even more regular than they're already doing. Yeah. So for them, it only makes sense to produce new products as fast as possible to increase their revenue. If they would change the business model to like a leasing model or something like this, that would probably change, right? But their business model is to produce something, sell it, and hope that the people literally put it in the drawer after half a year or a year, and for this reason then selling a new one. So this is one of the biggest problems existing in the case right now. And so in my opinion, therefore, a lot of the manufacturers, they even have the plans in their cupboards. And I spoke on a Circular World Economy Forum for two years ago with one big manufacturer without naming a name, and they told me they have, for example, to switching to a leasing model that the manufacturer continues to own the device and the customer uses it, which of course requires a longer lifetime of the product to make the manufacturer a profit out of it. They told me we have the whole paper in the cupboard, but as long as we do not have to do it, why we should? Because we make more money with on the other direction, the shareholder value will be increased, and this is often the most important thing for them.
And Sebastian, this is where you come in with Grover, right? So you have that subscription model for electronics products that you offer. How is it working?
Yeah, so basically for us at Grover, we don't go the leasing route. With us, you can rent your electronics from minimum of 1 month up to 24 months without any down payments, relatively low rates, everything is insured. So basically, if you need a camera for your vacation, just rent it, give it back after a month or after 2 months. You don't have to pay 1,200 euros for it. And it's also a good way for businesses if you know, like every year you need to upgrade your device because something new is coming out. Just rent it for a year. Don't have to put it on your only on the operational side of your balance sheet. Don't have to appreciate it, and then get a new device after next year. And that's then being recirculated, and the next person needs it, who might not need the newest iPhone or whatever, and can then use it. So we have, in our model, like every device that we have has about 3.5 to 4 renters over its lifetime, and if it doesn't make sense for us anymore to rent it out, then companies like Keynote come and play, where stuff is being refurbished and then sold off. So for us, that's a big part, but I want to actually go back 2 points when you talk about making it sexy. For us, it's about accessibility as well. First, with Grover, you don't have to pay full price or like a deducted price for a device. You can really say, okay, I'm just going to pay 50 euros a month for 3 months and have access to the device I need in order to participate in whatever it is you need to be participating. So I think that's also a big part. You need to make everyone participate in order to make really the circular economy work.
So can I jump in here? Because the circular economy also became very popular because it was shown as an alternative how you can still make money with the best what humankind has with innovation, entrepreneurship, etc. It's not an agenda of the tree huggers, the lefties at least in Austria. And so, but I think it's interesting what you said, Kilian. When I was at Circular Economy, we did the business case for a modular phone company called Fairphone. And it is a very different business case than just selling a phone. If you go for a leasing model, it's changing everything, the finance streams, the profit and loss, the insurance. And we really could only solve it together, which makes it fun to work with the insurance company, with the financier, with the customer, and the producer. So we kind of tried to build a safe place, pre-competitive place, where we try to solve that business model together, which one company can't do alone. So the circular economy needs this way of collaborative models, which maybe get you less profit immediately, but has to be the future and has to be accompanied with smart regulation. I think that's what we really need. I'm not all for regulation, but if the regulations are not changing, it's very difficult to come out of the old system into a new one and to swing and change customer behavior, looking very strictly at ourselves and say, what can we do? Where do we have less convenience sometimes maybe, but take the right choice? It has to come together so that this thing becomes the new normal.
And I think super important, I mean, it says circular economy. The economy part, this is about new business models, about rethinking the part when you design products, the entire supply chain, your entire value chain. I mean, this is something where the big mindset shift needs to happen. And I mean, you are two great examples of new business models that came out of this. But maybe, Kilian, you also said maybe the manufacturers will go into this field as well at some point in time. They will see, I mean, the big electronics companies, some are going into this because they see now that there is a new economic opportunity coming up.
Yeah, so personally, I mean, what Harald was mentioning regarding that the Fairphone example, which have a modular design, and therefore it makes it easier to repair it because you only have to, for example, you can exclude the camera and just replace the camera without opening the whole device and unscrew it with the gluing and so on. In my opinion, this has to be the long-term future of electronic devices, because this minimalizes on a maximum level electronic waste. And I'm often asked, like, what is your benefit from your operations as we're refurbishing electronic devices which are mainly not modular? And I say, for sure, I mean, I think the direction will go in this direction, but I don't think it will happen in 5 or 10 years. Personally, I don't think that an Apple will create a Fairphone-like device, modular, in the next 5 years. So even if this happens in 10 or 15 years, of course, we as a business would also have to develop and rethink our strategy, what refurbishing is. But just already to supporting this transition period until this happening would have a massive impact on the environment if more people are switching from buying new electronic devices to buying more refurbished devices. And this is our goal as a company and where we want to have our impact.
So e-waste, a massive problem out there, but maybe we open up, Harald, your perspective. What are the other big areas where you see great advancements in the field? I mean, think about textile, things are happening. We heard about construction. Yeah. Where do you see big steps happening right now?
So when you analyze where the most impact has to happen, it's obviously consumables, textile, the way how we dress, the way how we move. Mobility has to be a really fundamental change, and where we live. The built environment and infrastructure. And how we eat, the food and agri system. So in these 4 systems, you have the biggest opportunity for change. We're discussing in Austria now, the interesting thing is built environment. You can only do this together again. You need to build a national platform that makes sure we recycle all the materials, that makes these new ways of collaboration possible. I see suddenly in sectors where I would have never expected it. Like I work with the cement industry a lot for the climate change negotiation, because it's one of the big industries with nearly 10% or 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. They are starting to talk about circular cement. So if in these old-fashioned industries, this innovation becomes the driver, I'm becoming more hopeful. I think there's a lot happening, especially driven from consumer demand in the food and agricultural system. I think that's really, really cool what's happening. With blockchain and other technology to keep transparent supply chains in the food and agri world. And I think people start to really change the way how they dress as well by trying to incorporate more second life clothes. And mobility is, I think, maybe the one I see the least change. That's interesting. Because we need a massive investment still from the public sector to provide an infrastructure we all need to have. And it's maybe in a small country like Holland easier. But even my friends in Austria say, I need 2 cars. But I say, no, you don't need them. It's a convenience topic and a time question. But in mobility, I think a lot is going to come, and hopefully the public sector makes the right investment choices soon.
Maybe 2 comments on the mobility part, because we had the IAA last week in Munich, and there were a few vision cars that really showed circular economy in the automotive industry. And there was one car that was fully made out of recycled materials and is fully recyclable. So that idea I found quite advanced.
Nice.
So the ideas are coming. Of course, this is still far away from being implemented because it takes a lot more efforts, but definitely one of the big fields. And when you think of mobility, car sharing, so that's where we go into services again. So we're talking about the use of products. It's kind of also the reuse mechanism. One other idea I wanted to mention, because I like this example very much as well. There is a running shoe, a Swiss company. They offer a running shoe that you basically subscribe, you send it back. It's not getting refurbished, but kind of decomposed. And out of the material, you get a new shoe. I hope you'll be happy to wear my shoe that had a previous life. It will be hygienic, but there are a lot of concepts now happening where we see a lot of innovation as well.
Sorry, please.
No, I was about to say Adidas does the same thing now.
Yep.
You can rent your hiking gear and your climbing gear just for a vacation, then you send it back, and they refurbish stuff and then recirculate it.
Yep.
I think it's a time now for all of us to play a role in this. The example for me is mattresses. So we're discussing with the mattress industry, how can you make it circular? Mattress is a huge problem. There are hundreds of thousands of mattresses thrown away every single year, and they're mostly burned. But the thing is, at the moment, there are startups now starting to wash mattresses and try to give it a second life, but there are all kinds of liability and health issues that you can't do this and give it to another client and owner, because the health regulations don't allow for that yet. So if we customers help to give more feedback, I think, to the lawmakers, but also the companies, and try to say what is the new emerging consumer trends, and also try to shape this debate much more in a very active consumerism way, in a positive one. I think that's for us to stand up and have a voice to say what we want. You know, I would be totally happy with a second life mattress, but I think it's really important for the companies to hear that, because they then can plan for the business models how to implement this, and they know demand is coming. So I think, again, if consumers play an active role, it would be really important.
So let's go more into this. How do we make this transition really happening? I think that's still a long way to go. Kilian, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think the most important part is, to get away from this mindset that everything what is used is bad, right? So the majority of people, for sure in electronics, especially because you have your personal data on the device and you don't know what's happening with there, but also the mattress example, probably the majority of the audience here would say, I would never take a used mattress because of the hygiene reason, right? But it's also about like how we can educate the people. In your example with the startups with washing the mattresses, that this literally is a process that in the end of the day you get a like new mattress, but it had a life before, but now you can lie on it and it's as hygienic as a new one, right? And this is the same thing which we have challenges in electronics, right? Is we're promising the customer you get a like new device. But the customer says, like, yeah, but it was used before, so how that is possible that it's like new? Because people do not know how refurbishment works. So for us, it's not only the task to sell our refurbished device to the customer, but we have to go a step before and explain the customer what it means to refurbish a device, why these steps help us to make the device literally as good as new, and also have completely data deletion and everything, that they trust us, and when they did and bought the first product, then they're like, wow, that literally works. I thought there should be like a hoax behind it, but it works, and then they buy again. And I think this is not only covering on our case, but it's about education and having then the possibility that people share, as you mentioned, their positive experience, so that others are also able to trust, maybe in your word, your family and friends, that this mattress that you're using is perfect, right? And then others will do it again. And this is, I think, this movement which has to be created.
I mean, we have one example here. I'm just by intention looking at this. The plastic bottle, it's also a hygienic product. And this is made out of PET plastics. It's like, to some extent, we were not able to recycle it. Now this is fully recycled PET. Yeah. So the technology needs to catch up and make it in a way that it's actually the same quality as virgin. So the mattress example needs to be a completely new mattress made out of old material. And the same is true for PET. I think nobody's really thinking about this, that this plastic has been used before. I'm not sure if you've done this. I don't. I'll just drink it. Also, experience plays an important role, totally. manufacturers, we talked about this. We scratched a little bit the topic of regulations. A difficult one. How important do you feel regulations will be in the future?
Extremely. I mean, in the end, the market will decide things, but we need to make sure that politics push things in a certain direction. Like the right to repair is such an important one because, like, there's a finite amount of resources in the world, and we need to make sure we can reuse them. And being able to refurbish the device, give it a longer lifetime, and making sure it has multiple owners is the big key to that. In order to do that, we need to make sure the incentives are right. That can be politics, but can also be companies participating in, like, getting a revenue share on the leasing or the rental or whatever digital services that come with a device. So I think that's like multiple aspects, but regulation, I think, is an important one.
Do you feel there also, Harald, the European Union, the Green Deal, will play a big role and give a big push to the sector? Because there's circular economy somewhere in the document, which feels like, oh, it's a tiny fraction, but it could be a big, big step. How do you see this?
No, I think as a European, I'm fairly proud what the circular economy package is of the European Union and what they have done. I think that's really would have maybe not been so easy done only by member states, let's be very honest. So I think that was really a good step forward. But you asked the question, what has to happen? Yeah, I think governments have to start to govern. I think if I look at my government in Holland, I don't see very future-oriented policymakers and politicians, and that really annoys me. It's a huge crisis that I think they need to think 5-10 years ahead. That's the policy frameworks they are creating, and that's why I come back to this exercise. But it's not up to politicians alone. We are voting for the politicians, so it's up to us to put the right people into the office. And it's for me, it is the shift to come more in the leadership from your heart. However you want to, if this is too woo-hoo for you, but start to act as a human being. And if we do this, and hopefully there are more and more business leaders who stand up and even defy the stock market and say, I'm trying to do it differently, which is very difficult. But if the framework from the policymakers is right, and there are CEOs, business leaders who actually want to future-proof their own business in a way that this is the new normal in a couple of years, take the right decisions, not only for themselves, but for the supply chains, for the government structure, for the finances they're taking. And then finally, us, every day we have choices what we do with our wallet, with our pocket, with our money. We have to live more impeccably. We can't allow anymore for a little bit less bad. I think that for me summarizes, a little bit less bad in 2021 is just not okay. I think fundamentally better, and that together is the slogan of this year.
And maybe third dimension, impact startups. I mean, this is what you're representing. We have a lot of representatives here. Do you also feel that this movement is putting a lot of positive pressure on established manufacturers, on politics, on consumers as well? Or also there's still a long way to go, Kilian?
I mean, personally, I think it's still a long way to go, sadly. But I also, regarding the regulation point, I think the market will involve itself. But we hear since years it's 5 to 12, right? And we have to react now. And I think regulations have to increase the speed that the market reacts. But also, I think touching on the politics side, right? When we are looking that our politicians always praise we want to be more sustainable, like circular economy is important, everything. But at the same time, like the purchases are not often circular, right? How they build their buildings are not always circular. So at least these people which standing up and ask for votes, exactly because of this reason, they should be the forerunner and saying everything which is spent with our money, with taxation money, should be circular to ensure that we're going in the right direction and they live the direction what they propose and selling themselves. That is my personal opinion.
Can I end on a positive note? Because it's very important. The example is from the car industry. Now we are in Germany, and it's an important industry. I think it was only 4 years ago, 2016, that the IEA said, International Energy Agency, that in 2070, the last car will be manufactured with a diesel engine, with a combustion engine. But now, maybe you have seen that this year, this whole thing has changed. Elon Musk came and said, I'm going to make my own car. He open sourced all the technology. Cities are saying we want to be CO2-free zones. And then suddenly the car makers are saying, I think Volvo was part of it, Mercedes, GM, General Motors, we're going to produce the last combustion engine fueled car in 2030, 2030. So the change of the system has been shortened by 4 decades. So things, when the right things and the right players are working together, things can truly happen very fast. So that gives me a lot of hope that things will happen fast enough, because the alternative is just not such a nice option.
So Sebastian, your chance to also end with a positive note. What keeps you positive that we make a good transition towards a circular economy?
I mean, obviously, do some advertising for our company. It's like our growth rates. You see, like, people are getting away from, I need to own this thing. Like, it's still so ingrained, especially in German culture, my house, my car, my boat. But now people shift towards, like, hey, why do I really need to own this? Do I really need to buy this new? Like, and like making that decision, you see those changes, and like, that's it's a great to be part of that.
The numbers keep you positive. Okay,
yeah,
thank you very much, Harald. Thank you very much, Kilian and Sebastian, for this great panel. This is your round of applause. Thanks, everyone. And we're going back to back, and we talk about sustainability, innovation, whether that's a success factor for manufacturers. And my pleasure to now welcome Dr. Moritz Gomm. He's Sustainability Innovation Lead at Zülke. Moritz, warm welcome. And we have Dr. Jörg Praczyk, your Senior Vice President for Group R&D at Vilo. Jörg, warm welcome. The stage is all yours.
Okay, hello. Is my mic on? Yes, now. So I'm working for an innovation service provider. What we do is, with about 1,400 engineers, is help customers build the next big innovative thing. But what is innovative, that is changing over time. And I've brought you a slide here, which I put together to show you over the last 100 years what was innovative and how innovative factors become to hygiene factors over time, because new innovative dimensions come. And we are very sure at Zülke that sustainability will be one of the new and very important innovative drivers, together with other things that has come up in the last 10, 20 years, which is connectivity and user experience. And Vilo is here to present you a demonstration of how this looks today already. So we at Zülke we see 4 areas where you can become sustainable as a company or do something. The first one is become a sustainable company in itself, things like Planetly and Plan A is doing. Then that you sell products and services that are more sustainable than before, so improve them, but you're still selling the same stuff. The third one is things that are completely new and only exist because of our climate and environmental issues, so products for the planet, service for the planets, and of course all the efforts we need to do to make the transition in energy and transport and others. And we focus on 2, 3, and 4, and we of course have different dimensions how we can do it in these different areas. There's the efficiency to make more with less, consistency to have consistent technologies which are consistent with nature. We can also call them efficient, and sufficiency. Sufficiency is having a moderate style of living, like frugalism, minimalism, stuff like that. And of course, the problem is efficiency alone doesn't do the trick, because, as you know, there are the rebound effects, so every improvement we made in the last 40 years were overcompensated by other effects. So this doesn't help us enough. What we need is consistent technologies, which is, of course, not very easy. If you think of your business, what are consistent technologies in this area? They have to be developed often. And the third thing is, I think the sufficiency is the most important factor for us as private consumers. So we can do that, but the companies are looking for growth, so that's something which is a bit contradictory for them. And what we do, and when we work with companies like Vilo, is we look at efficiency, of course, eco-design, and we normally combine that with value engineering methods or cost-cutting measures, because there are still a lot of companies who say, yes, we want to be more green and more environmental friendly, but it can't cost much more. If you go towards consistency, we speak about circular economy and cradle-to-cradle approaches. We just had a great discussion about that. And sufficiency in a context of business often comes with new business models, pay per use, pay per result, and others. So these are sort of the tools we are using. Little advertisement for a network that we've built up for companies to come together to want to become much more sustainable. And yeah, I'll skip these. These are the typical offerings, lifecycle assessments, all sorts of eco-design measures that we help companies to implement so that their development processes become more circular, more recycling-oriented and stuff like that. And last but not least, help them to rethink the business models to make them more sustainable on that area as well. But what I want to show you now is Vilo. Vilo is one of our customers. We've been working with them for 5-6 years now on IoT and connectivity, and they have a very, very strong focus on sustainability. You can see some of their achievements. They are the winner of the German Sustainability Award 2021, for example, one of the founding members of the Sustainability Circle, and this is the real world, and I'm happy to hand over to Jörg. Thank you.
Thank you, Moritz. I want to start with a very important insight that industrial companies dealing with physical products need to have when starting to deal with sustainability topics. Sustainability is not just a product feature. You might think this is crazy, but believe me, this is not always straightforward for such kind of companies. We at Vilo regard sustainability as part of our DNA. We are a pump company. We move water. Next year we're going to celebrate our 150th anniversary. We provide products, systems and solutions in 3 market segments, building services, water management and industry. And with 8,000 employees worldwide, we generate a sales of roughly 1.5 billion euro. We are recognized as an innovation leader and a digital pioneer in the global pump market. In the next minutes, I will talk about our dimensions of our sustainability DNA. Products, services, company, footprint, and sustainability strategy. 10% of the global energy need is used by pumps. In Europe, more than 200 terawatt hours per year can be saved when replacing old products with new high-efficiency products. This is about 80 middle-size coal power plants. Products like our new Stratos Maxo, Stratos Giga, they save up to 80% of energy compared to the old predecessors. We design all our products for highest efficiency and for recyclability, but we do not only design for recyclability. 100% of the products we get back from our customers we recycle in our own recycling center. We even recycle rare earth magnets. More and more we see that digitalization becomes a huge enabler for sustainability. So that's why we equip more and more products with intelligent control function and especially with networking capabilities. So that not only the product itself, but the product in the ecosystem can be optimized. Ecosystem could be a hospital or a office building in which the product is built in. Based on this networking capabilities, we also offer remote access to our product. And together with Zülke, we developed Vilo Smart Connect, which is a remote access for products in the field. With this remote access, you can optimize remotely products in the installation based on the real installation data. And also, service is more and more digitalized based on these remote access offers. More and more often, physical presence of service technicians is not longer necessary to do troubleshooting or optimization. And finally, we even created a kind of business model based on this, the Vilo Energy Solutions. We offer to our customer to analyze their old products, their old pumps in the installations, and calculate in detail, based on the real load profile, the potential savings of their products, of the pumps, the potential saving of the new pump in their installation and the payback times. Typically, these payback times are below 2 years. So this is a win-win. Customers save CO2, and we generate additional sales through proactive replacement. Beginning of this year, we inaugurated the new Velo Park in Dortmund. We invested roughly 300 million euro in this new Velo Park. Apart from latest pump technology, we installed PV, we installed combined power and heat, we installed 100 charging points for e-mobility and much more. For the office building, we got the LEED Gold status, and with more than 30,000 data points in the building management system, we constantly optimize the energy consumption of all the buildings, of all the facilities in the Velo Park. This is a huge investment, and our commitment to sustainability, to climate protection. And this is well appreciated by our employees, but also more and more by our customers. Also, inside our smart factory, digitalization is a big enabler for sustainability. All our production lines are equipped with digital interfaces. They are Industry 4.0 ready and fully digitalized, so that these processes are constantly optimized, for sure for production efficiency, but at the same time for energy consumption, as well as the logistics footprint, internal and external logistics footprint. With all these measures, we were able to reduce the energy consumption of our new site in Dortmund, the headquarters of Velo, by 40%. This is 3,500 tons of CO2 per year, and this equals to 280,000 trees. For people not so much involved in these discussions about CO2, and this is quite a lot of your employees, it's much easier to understand what that means, what is the impact of their work. And it's really necessary to have ambassadors, to have fans for sustainability if you want to be a sustainability innovator. The rest of the energy we compensate so that since the beginning of the year we're climate neutral in our headquarters in Dortmund, and this is approved and certified by the TÜV. This is our statement against greenwashing. Until 2025, we want to be climate neutral in all our sites around the world, and this is part of our sustainability strategy together with 4 other pillars. Currently, we work on Scope 3 and science-based targets, and for sure on the implementation of the sustainability strategy. To be a real sustainability innovator, a real sustainability leader, you need to create a kind of sustainability mindset and identity for your employees, for your customers. Only then you can make sure that your employees breathe sustainability each and every day, because sustainability is not just a product feature. And now, Moritz.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to get in touch, please come to our booth or check our emails or LinkedIn contacts. Thank you very much, Impact Festival, for having us. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Moritz and Jörg, for the presentation. We're now coming to an end of our first innovation area on resource efficiency. I think that was a great start into the Impact Festival. Lots of good energy in the room, lots of impactful discussions. Laura, what's next?
Yes, so now we're going to have a lunch break, a well-deserved one, because I'm pretty sure that you soaked up a lot of information. But before we're going to meet again at 1:15, yeah, yes. That's about like 75 minutes, you have enough time. I quickly want to announce our next innovation area because we are leaving the old one and going into the new one. And this one is regulatory technologies and sustainable services. So when you come back, we're going to talk a lot about how we can manage climate for corporations. We're going to talk, and for corporates, we're going to talk about supply chain management and transparency. And also, we're going to talk about the role of the bank and how they can play an important role as part of the solution. So, in that regard, enjoy the next hour. Whatever you will do, have a snack, drink some water, or even enjoy our exhibition. If you need some restrooms, I have to admit, we have to tell you, just go all the way to from my side to the right. And we're going to see you back at 1:15.
Yes, enjoy your break. See you later. Bye-bye.
See you later.